The chocolate milk exploded across Harper's white polo shirt, like a Jackson Pollock painting. 200 students in Lincoln High's cafeteria froze, phones already recording. Mason Reed stepped back with that practiced smirk, the one that said his father's name was carved into the gymnasium wall. In 12 minutes, during fifth period announcements, that smirk would crack. Harper's stumble wasn't clumsy. It was calculated, each step mapping security camera angles with precision. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds before the whispers began. Harper Wells remained perfectly still, her shoulders lowered slightly, breathing controlled despite the cold liquid seeping through fabric. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, calculating. "Oops," Mason said, his voice carrying across the cafeteria with practiced arrogance. At 6'2", with basketball muscles wrapped in designer clothes that cost more than most families spent on groceries, he commanded attention through sheer presence. Behind him stood his usual crew, Tyler Nash and Brad Collins, legacy students who'd learned early that proximity to power was power itself. Harper Wells had been the invisible girl for exactly 3 weeks at Lincoln High. Scholarship student, they whispered. Lives in Riverside apartments. Doesn't belong here. What they didn't see was the small metallic strip along the edge of her phone case, or how she always positioned herself with clear sightlines to exits. What they couldn't know was that every movement, every word, every cruel smile was being documented with professional precision. She reached for napkins, her breathing steady, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. A technique taught in very specific training programs that most 17-year-olds never encountered. "Accidents happen," she replied quietly, dabbing at the stain while mentally noting the timestamp, 11:43 a.m. Mason owned the cafeteria like his father owned Reed Automotive, through sheer presence and inherited entitlement. The Reed family name funded half the school's sports programs, their automotive dealership sponsoring everything from homecoming floats to graduation ceremonies. Money bought silence in Lincoln, Ohio, and the Reed family had plenty of both. "Guess your shirt's not designer enough to repel accidents," Mason continued, earning laughter from the surrounding tables. His audience was captive, trained through months of social conditioning to find entertainment in others' humiliation. Harper continued cleaning methodically, switching her phone from right hand to left, a subtle adjustment that freed her dominant hand while keeping the device's recording capability optimal. The movement was so practiced, it appeared unconscious, but nothing about Harper Wells was unconscious anymore. "Look at that," Tyler sneered, pointing at Harper's soaked shirt. "Charity case can't even afford backup clothes." Tyler Nash was all aggression and no subtlety, the kind of bully who mistook volume for intelligence. "Maybe Daddy's welfare check hasn't come in yet," Brad added, earning more laughter from nearby tables. Brad Collins was smarter than Tyler, but lacked the courage to lead, content to follow in Mason's shadow while delivering cutting remarks designed to wound. Harper stood slowly, gathering her books with deliberate precision. Her voice remained calm, almost conversational. "Actually, this state has one-party consent laws for recording, quite useful in situations involving harassment." The comment was casual, almost offhand, but several students exchanged glances. Mason's expression flickered, just for a second. The confident mask slipped, revealing something uncertain underneath. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just an interesting legal fact." Harper's tone remained neutral, professional. "My government class covers educational civil rights pretty thoroughly. Amazing what you learn when you pay attention." The trio watched her walk away, something about her response nagging at them. She hadn't cried, hadn't run, hadn't given them the satisfaction they expected. Instead, she'd dropped legal terms like breadcrumbs, creating an uncomfortable awareness that maybe they had underestimated their target. Harper moved through the cafeteria with purpose, her path taking her past 3 separate security cameras. She knew their locations, their blind spots, their recording schedules. Knowledge was ammunition, and she'd been loading her weapon for weeks. If you've ever experienced a situation like this or know someone facing harassment, please hit that like button to support victims everywhere. Your comments sharing personal experiences help build a community where no one suffers alone. And if these stories inspire you or help someone find their voice, consider hitting the thanks button below. Your support helps us reach someone out there who might be going through their darkest moment and needs to know they're not alone. By 7th period, the video was everywhere. Scholarship spill was trending on the school's private social media pages, comments ranging from sympathy to mockery. Someone had added music, a sad violin soundtrack that made Harper's milk-soaked stumble look pathetic in slow motion. Harper sat in AP History, back to the wall, 30-degree angle view of the door. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed the stain but said nothing, understanding the unspoken rules that governed Lincoln High's social ecosystem. Harper's hand moved to adjust her mechanical pencil, the weight slightly heavier than standard issue, and continued taking notes as if nothing had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text notification. "Nice shower? Maybe next time we'll use something that doesn't wash out so easy. A friend?" Harper screenshot the message immediately, noting the metadata automatically captured. Time, date, sender information, all preserved in digital amber. She'd learned to think like a prosecutor, building cases one piece of evidence at a time. The anonymous threats were escalating exactly as she'd predicted. Bullies followed patterns, and Mason Reed was disappointingly predictable in his cruelty. 3 days later, Harper's locker had been decorated. Red marker scrawled across the metal in angry letters, "Welfare Princess." The message was crude, obvious, and perfectly suited to Mason's mentality. Harper photographed it from multiple angles before maintenance could clean it. Proper lighting, timestamp visible, context established. Principal Anderson appeared beside her like a guilty conscience, coffee in hand, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Wells, I'm sure this was just a prank. Boys will be boys, you know." Harper's response was measured, professional. "Of course, though I'm curious about the security footage from this hallway. Camera 7 has an excellent view of this section." Anderson's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips, liquid trembling slightly. "How do you know about Camera 7? "I notice patterns." Harper closed her phone, the photos already uploading to an encrypted cloud server. The technology was more sophisticated than it appeared, each image tagged with forensic-level metadata that would stand up in court. Speaking of patterns, I've been researching Lincoln High's disciplinary statistics. Fascinating how certain students seem to have immunity. A text from an unlisted number appeared on her screen. "Package confirmed. Reviewing materials now." Harper deleted it immediately, but not before Anderson glimpsed enough to raise uncomfortable questions. The principal's hands were shaking slightly as he walked away, his coffee growing cold in the cup. The first product placement came naturally as Harper prepared for the next phase. She reached into her backpack and pulled out what appeared to be a standard digital recorder, the kind students used for lectures. But this device was far more sophisticated than it appeared. Advanced evidence-gathering technology designed for legal documentation, featuring timestamp verification, audio enhancement capabilities, and tamper-proof file encryption that law enforcement agencies relied on for court-admissible recordings. The next confrontation was building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Harper could feel it in the hallways, see it in Mason's increasingly aggressive posturing. He was losing control of the narrative, and desperate people made dangerous mistakes. Harper's research project lay scattered across the hallway floor, like academic confetti 3 days later. 3 weeks of work on educational inequality, destroyed in seconds. Mason stood over the mess, Tyler and Brad flanking him like bodyguards protecting their king. "Oops," Mason said, using his favorite word with practiced cruelty. "Guess your welfare scholarship can't buy you better reflexes." Students gathered in a loose circle, phones recording, waiting for tears that never came. Instead, Harper knelt and began collecting pages with methodical precision. But her movements weren't random. She was positioning herself, creating space, mapping the crowd's formation like a chess master planning 6 moves ahead. "You know," she said conversationally, not looking up from her task, "destruction of academic materials in a public school setting violates several district policies." She stood smoothly, papers organized despite their damaged state. Section 4.7 of the Student Handbook specifically addresses intentional interference with educational activities. The crowd murmured appreciatively. The quiet scholarship girl was showing unexpected spine, and teenagers loved nothing more than watching authority figures squirm. "Big words from trailer trash," Tyler sneered, trying to reclaim the narrative for his leader. Harper's stance shifted almost imperceptibly. Weight balanced, shoulders squared, breathing controlled. The change was subtle, but unmistakable to anyone who knew how to read body language. "Careful, Tyler. Your father's landscaping company has several district contracts. Wouldn't want any complications." The murmur grew louder. How did the quiet scholarship girl know about Nash Landscaping's business relationships? What else did she know that she shouldn't? Mason's face flushed red with anger and something else. The first stirring of genuine fear. "You think you're smart, but you don't know who you're messing with." Harper's smile was small but significant. "Actually, Mason, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Richard Reed, owner of Reed Automotive. Annual district donations averaging $47,000 over the past 5 years. I've done my research." The hallway fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of lockers slamming. Several students held their breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. A scholarship student who refused to be intimidated by legacy wealth. That afternoon, Harper sat in the library, apparently studying but actually compiling evidence with the precision of a federal prosecutor. Her notebook contained more than class notes, detailed logs of incidents, witness names, timestamp correlations between hallway encounters, and security camera blind spots. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mason's account. "Maybe you should transfer schools. Lincoln doesn't like troublemakers." Harper smiled and immediately forwarded the message to an encrypted email account, the header information preserved intact. Digital trails were permanent, even when people thought they were being clever. Every threat, every harassment, every attempt at intimidation was building her case stronger. "Researching anything interesting?" asked Ms. Rodriguez, the librarian, approaching Harper's table with genuine curiosity. "Educational civil rights law," Harper replied truthfully, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Did you know that Title IX covers more than just sports? It protects students from harassment based on sex, including harassment that creates a hostile educational environment." Ms. Rodriguez leaned closer, intrigued by the depth of Harper's knowledge. "That's very specific knowledge for a high school student." Harper's response was carefully measured. "I find legal frameworks fascinating, especially enforcement mechanisms. Amazing how many people don't understand that schools receiving federal funding must comply with federal civil rights laws." The bathroom confrontation came exactly when Harper predicted it would. She had anticipated the location, even chosen it strategically. Camera coverage optimal. Witnesses likely to intervene if necessary. Acoustics perfect for recording clear audio evidence. Mason cornered her by the sinks. His size advantage meant to intimidate, his presence filling the small space like a storm cloud. "You think you're smart," he hissed, stepping closer until she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with desperation. "But you don't know who you're messing with. My dad funds half this school." Harper's response was delivered with the calm precision of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "Richard Reed, owner of Reed Automotive, annual district donations averaging $47,000 over the past 5 years. Board member since 2019. Currently under review for tax optimization strategies related to charitable deductions." Mason's face went through several shades of red as the implications sank in. "How do you—" "Public records are fascinating." Harper's hand moved to her pocket, fingers finding the enhanced recording device and activating it with practiced ease. The motion was subtle, invisible to her aggressor, but capturing every word with legal-grade clarity. Like disciplinary records, incident reports, patterns of selective enforcement based on family wealth and social status. The menace in Mason's voice was unmistakable now, his carefully maintained facade cracking under pressure. "You're playing a dangerous game, scholarship girl." Harper's voice remained steady, professional, the tone of someone who'd been trained to deal with threats from people far more dangerous than teenage bullies. "The only dangerous thing here is thinking that money makes you untouchable." She paused, head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond human hearing. "Did you hear that?" Mason's confusion was genuine. "Hear what?" "The PA system. They test it every day at 2:15 p.m. Excellent acoustics in these hallways. Sound carries beautifully through the ventilation system." Harper's smile was enigmatic, suggesting knowledge that Mason couldn't begin to comprehend. The next morning brought an unexpected summons to Principal Anderson's office. Mason sat in the corner chair, looking appropriately victimized, his performance almost convincing to anyone who didn't know the full story. The wounded expression, the carefully disheveled appearance. It was theater designed to manipulate authority figures who wanted simple solutions to complex problems. "Miss Wells," Anderson began, shuffling papers nervously while avoiding direct eye contact, "I'm afraid we've received some concerning reports about your behavior. Threats, intimidation, inappropriate research into other students' families." Harper remained perfectly calm, her posture relaxed but alert. "What specific policies have I violated, sir?" Anderson's hesitation was telling. "Well, harassment, for one." "I'd like to see the documentation of that harassment," Harper replied with the precision of someone who understood due process better than the administrator attempting to railroad her. "Time, date, witnesses. The usual evidence required for disciplinary action under district policy." Mason spoke up from his corner, playing his role with practiced victimization. "She's been stalking me, Mr. Anderson, looking up my family's business, following me around school, making threats." Harper's response was delivered with devastating calm. "Interesting accusation. Because I have time-stamped evidence of every interaction we've had. Would you like me to share that with the district review board?" Anderson's pen slipped in his fingers, leaving an ink mark across his notes. "District Review Board?" "Standard procedure for appeals," Harper said smoothly, her knowledge of educational bureaucracy apparently encyclopedic. "My mother is quite familiar with educational due process. She works closely with various oversight agencies." The meeting ended with more questions than answers, Harper walking away unscathed, while Anderson and Mason exchanged worried glances. The power dynamic was shifting, and everyone in the room could feel it happening. Walking home that afternoon, Harper noticed the black sedan following 2 blocks behind her route. Amateur surveillance, probably Tyler's older brother, thinking he was being clever with his untrained observation techniques. Harper turned into Wilson Park, taking the winding path that would force the car to either follow on foot or lose visual contact entirely. She sat on a bench and pulled out her phone, placing a call that connected immediately. "Status report," she said simply, her voice carrying the crisp professionalism of someone accustomed to giving and receiving official communications. The voice on the other end was equally professional. Official. "Package received. Documentation is comprehensive. Ready for Phase 2? Almost. Need one more escalation event to complete the evidence chain." Harper glanced back toward the street, where the sedan had been forced to park conspicuously. "They're predictable. It won't take long." She ended the call and noticed her sleeve had shifted during the conversation, revealing a small tattoo on her wrist. 3 interlocked triangles, geometric and precise. Not the kind of art most teenagers chose, and certainly not something randomly selected from a parlor wall. The sedan was gone when she looked again, its occupants apparently realizing they'd been spotted by someone who knew how surveillance was supposed to work. The next morning brought news that would shake Lincoln High's foundation. Harper sat in government class as Mrs. Patterson read from her tablet about an announcement that had arrived before dawn from the State Board of Education. Harper discreetly activated her advanced communication device, a sophisticated piece of technology that looked like a standard smartphone but contained encrypted channels, secure data transmission capabilities, and real-time connection to state education databases that investigation teams used for coordinating complex institutional reviews. "The State Board will be conducting a comprehensive review of disciplinary practices and scholarship program integrity at Lincoln High School," Mrs. Patterson read aloud, her voice betraying confusion about the sudden announcement. Several students shifted nervously in their seats. Harper noticed Mason's face had gone pale, his usual confidence evaporating like morning mist under harsh sunlight. The investigation was no longer theoretical. It was here. Have you ever wondered why a student would have such deep legal knowledge? What happens when bullies discover they've chosen the wrong target? Leave us a comment. Who do you think Harper really is, and what would you do in a similar situation? The emergency assembly was called for third period. State Education Inspector Janet Wells walked to the podium, her presence commanding immediate attention from the packed auditorium. Students whispered nervously as teachers lined the walls, their expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed panic. Harper sat in the back row, no longer trying to be invisible. Her posture had changed over the past weeks, straighter, more confident, carrying herself with the authority of someone who no longer needed to hide. "I'm here to address serious allegations of discriminatory practices and selective enforcement of disciplinary policies," Inspector Wells began, her voice carrying the weight of state authority. "This investigation was initiated after we received comprehensive documentation from an undercover assessment conducted over the past month." Mason's head snapped around, scanning the auditorium with growing desperation. His eyes found Harper, and for the first time, he saw her clearly. Not as a vulnerable scholarship student to be tormented, but as someone who'd been watching, documenting, building a case with professional precision. Harper stood slowly and walked to the front of the auditorium. Every student watched in stunned silence as the quiet girl they'd ignored or mocked moved with purpose and authority. Inspector Wells smiled at her with obvious pride. "Students, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Harper Wells, Junior Educational Liaison with the State Board of Education. For the past month, she's been conducting a systematic review of this institution's practices. The auditorium exploded in whispers, gasps, and the sound of 200 teenagers suddenly understanding they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Mason's face crumpled as the full scope of his miscalculation became clear. After the assembly, Mason cornered Harper in the hallway, his desperation making him dangerous in ways his earlier arrogance never had. "You set me up," he snarled, grabbing her arm with enough force to bruise. "You completely ruined my life." Harper's response was textbook perfect, professionally trained. She didn't resist the grab. Instead, she used his momentum to shift her position, creating space while simultaneously activating her recording device with movements so practiced they appeared unconscious. "Mason Reed, you're currently committing assault on a state education official," she said clearly, her voice carrying down the hallway where students and teachers were gathering. "In full view of security camera 12. "I don't care anymore," Mason yelled, his grip tightening as panic overrode any remaining common sense. "My family owns this place. We built half these buildings. Not anymore." Harper's tone remained professional, even as Tyler and Brad moved to flank her, their loyalty to Mason overriding their instinct for self-preservation. "Your father's automotive dealership is under investigation for tax irregularities related to his school donations. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit is quite thorough in their audits." Mason released her arm as if burned, stepping back with shock written across his features. "FBI?" Harper straightened her sleeve, the movement revealing more of the geometric tattoo that suddenly seemed less like teenage rebellion and more like professional identification. "Did you really think the state board works alone? This is a federal investigation, Mason. Educational civil rights violations carry serious penalties under federal law." Principal Anderson's office had never seen so many suits. FBI agents, state investigators, district supervisors, all studying the comprehensive evidence file Harper had compiled over her month-long assignment. Every incident documented, every witness statement recorded, every policy violation catalogued with prosecutorial precision. "The scope of institutional negligence is unprecedented," announced Agent Martinez from the FBI's Educational Crimes Unit, her badge gleaming under the office's fluorescent lights. "Systematic discrimination, selective enforcement, and financial irregularities that appear to constitute federal civil rights violations." Harper sat quietly in the corner, no longer playing the role of student. Her mother placed a proud hand on her shoulder as they watched Anderson's career implode in real time, years of willful blindness finally catching up with him. "Mason Reed, Tyler Nash, and Brad Collins are suspended pending criminal investigation," Agent Martinez continued, reading from an official document. "Additionally, Richard Reed's business relationship with the district is terminated immediately, and all contracts are under federal review." Through the office window, Harper could see students gathering in the hallway, phones recording as news vans pulled into the parking lot. The story was going viral, but this time with a very different narrative than Mason had intended. Mason sat in the hallway outside the principal's office, his varsity jacket looking suddenly cheap under the harsh fluorescent lights. His hands shook as he scrolled through news articles appearing in real time. Federal investigation rocks elite high school. Scholarship fraud scheme exposed by teen investigator. Systemic discrimination uncovered at Lincoln High. His father arrived with 3 lawyers, their expensive suits unable to mask Richard Reed's panic. The automotive empire crumbled as customers canceled orders overnight. "I didn't know she was working with the government," Mason repeated desperately. "Exactly the problem," Agent Martinez said. "You never bothered to know anything about the students you were tormenting." 6 months later, Mason faced criminal charges. Principal Anderson was suspended. The scholarship program was restructured with independent oversight. But Harper's work wasn't finished. A manila envelope marked Riverside Middle School appeared on her mother's desk. A text appeared on Harper's secure phone. Impressive work. Interested in expanded opportunities? Harper typed back, "When?" Because there would always be another Mason Reed, another corrupt system. And Harper Wells would be ready. The quiet girl with the hidden badge wasn't finished teaching lessons to those who thought power meant permission to harm others. Some battles ended, but the war for justice never did.
The story ends here, but there are many more videos waiting for you. So, if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to the Wrong Target Story channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell. See you in the next story.